Hey everyone, this is Robert Keens of goldsilverpros.com. It's December 22nd, 2020. So we near the end of the year. I wanted to bring a very special guest back to the program to take a look back at 2020 and all the stuff that has happened and what may lie in store for us the next couple of weeks leading up to the big January 6th decision day for the U.S. election. Rob Kirby, how are you doing today?
I'm doing fine, Rob. Pleasure to be with you again.
So we've had a pretty good discussion before the recording on what it looks like in the U.S. right now. Of course, we're talking mostly about the presidential election and both sides fighting it out, basically. We've got the mainstream media pumping a Biden win. We have electors in Nevada and I believe 6 other states, Republican electors voting for Trump. A lot going on there. It seems to be continued disputed election. What are your views on that and where do we stand with that?
Well, the election, in my view, is a dog's breakfast. My view is that if Biden is installed as president, it is synonymous with the fall of the republic. Mm-hmm. I hope and pray that that does not occur. And that's not to say that I worship the ground that Trump walks on, because far from it. I think he's created much of his own problem with the way he manages people and assets. But I'm in favor of the republic being preserved, however that needs to be done. And it seems to me, at least, that the judiciary and the civil courts are not functioning as they should. Because in my view, at least, the Supreme Court in America has expressed an unwillingness to hear evidence of election misdoings by claiming that cases being put before them have no standing. Mm-hmm. In my view, the amount of irregularities in the electoral process in America have been so in your face substantial that I scratch my head and other places when I see a body like the Supreme Court saying they don't want to hear evidence. Because to me, the evidence is glaring and in your face.
Yeah, and that had a chance to be a landmark case for them and the sort of case that you think that they would live for hearing on the Supreme Court. And yet I think it was a 7-2 ruling that they said that Texas and the other states lack standing to bring that suit, which I found astounding. It was a procedural issue that they kicked it back down to the lower courts, but I would have thought they would have wanted to hear that one, seeing as it's so important, like you said, to the Republic.
Yeah, me too. And Rob, that's why I have a gut feeling that the way forward in this matter is going to involve some kind of a military interjection or response to preserve the republic. I mean, it seems to me that in American history, that none other than Abraham Lincoln suspended habeas corpus and ultimately conducted roundups and tribunals and had the military involved and effectively for a period of time dismissed the omnipotency of the Supreme Court and did restore the republic. You know, could we see a replay of that or something like that? Mm-hmm. I don't know. Would I welcome it as opposed to having the republic fall and seeing Joe Biden installed as president? You betcha. Anyway, I guess at the end of the day, what I really hope for is that we see a peaceful resolution to this, and we see the public confidence in the political process restored. Because I don't think there is much confidence in the political process right now anywhere in the Western world.
Yeah, and the reason I think we're saying this is not necessarily because we're pro-Trump or we're picking sides. It's just the election irregularities and all of the issues that went on with the Dominion software and
Rob,
the voting machines.
I only want to see the preservation of the republic. It doesn't matter to me which flavor, to me, in all honesty, Democrat, Republican are two sides of the same sucker. You can lick either side, you're going to taste the same thing. But it's the republic that needs to be restored, because the republic, has been wounded, and hopefully not fatally. And if Joe Biden is installed as president, to me it means that elections no longer count. They become moot. And it becomes a ridiculous notion that you'd even have an election again. And that, of course, leads you down the garden path to totalitarianism. And his history is replete with examples of that not working out good for the people. So hopefully we don't go there.
So prior to the military tribunal option, we have the January 6th date where the election is certified, the electors cast their votes. The vice president has to then basically sign off on that process. Do you think that Pence is going to sign off on that process if the 7 states bring dual electors to that process?
Well, if recent history is any indication, we can see that Trump has been very good. One thing Trump has been very, very good at is surrounding himself with traitorous individuals. Now, does Pence fall into that category? I think there's probably a small crowd of people who would suggest that Pence has more allegiance to the globalist entity or the deep state, perhaps as much as outgoing Attorney General Barr did, or Comey, or any of these other clowns that were in positions of high public trust, who absolutely, sold out and were traitors to the republic. It's not really that they were traitors to Trump. They were traitors to the republic, turning a blind eye to absolutely devastating transgressions being committed by people that are clearly behind a globalist entity, which is anti the republic, anti the Constitution, anti to law and order. And that's untenable. Yeah,
and if we no longer have a valid constitution in the U.S., what happens? As you said, the rest of the world is watching. What happens to these constitutional processes in other countries?
Well, the whole world could descend into anarchy, in my view, or the likelihood or possibility of that goes up dramatically. And it's very destabilizing. And it opens the door for, at least in my view, it opens the door for the installment of a very, very vicious totalitarian regime. Could it be led by China? Possibly. Could it be led by an as yet unnamed actor? I don't know. But I don't like where it's going or where we're pointed right now.
Yeah. We have a long holiday weekend here coming up. Could be an opportune time for them to maybe shut down the banks or Wall Street if they wanted to try to fight back against.
Well, you see, concurrently with the geopolitical or election issue, let's say election-centric issues, we also have a financial system that is, I'm going to say, possibly hanging by a thread. I would say teetering. I mean, in recent months, we've seen record amounts of deficit creation or money printing. We've seen the Fed's balance sheet acknowledge money creation to the tune of 3 or 4 trillion in new money this year. if you're a follower of the work of Dr. Mark Skidmore and Catherine Austin Fitts, what Skidmore's work is uncovering with the shenanigans that are going on under the Social Security Trust umbrella show that there is a churn in retirement assets that is off the charts. Because I believe under the entire Social Security Trust umbrella, I think there's about 300 billion in identifiable retirement assets that are under management. The turnover on those assets in the last year we have data for, coming from the government, is that there was a churn of over 40 trillion on 300 billion in assets. Well, Rob, you and I both know that's not the way retirement assets are managed.
Mm-hmm.
And that is, to me, highly indicative that there is very likely covert or undeclared money creation coming out of that edifice. Probably to the tune of tens of trillions, in my view. So the amount of money in existence, what this comes back to, the amount of money in existence in my world is probably exceedingly much larger than what is acknowledged or declared. And that goes a long way to explaining why, despite half of our economy being shuttered, we have record high equity prices. It would also go a long way to explaining, despite the fact that foreigners are no longer participating the way they used to in yesteryears in US government debt auctions, interest rates remain basically hugging zero. You know, like forever number of years, low yields persist. And in my view, anyway, debt is being monetized not only monetized, Rob, debt is being monetized and memory hold at an exceedingly fast rate. And I mean, very interesting. A cohort of mine sent along a chart showing the reduction in foreign participation at U.S. government bond auctions and the rise in the percentage of the auctions that are being taken down by the Federal Reserve. And I mean, if you look at that chart with the two lines showing the rise in the percentage that the Fed takes at every auction and the reduction of foreign or percentage of the auctions that foreigners are taking, I mean, we are clearly on an unsustainable trajectory on both fronts. And ultimately, what has to happen is the dollar has to fall. And that's precisely what has been happening. I mean, isn't it funny, Rob? In some respects, we have record high equity prices. We have record low bond yields, which should tell you that people are falling over themselves to buy anything denominated in dollars. But the dollar's at multi-year lows. Like, the empirical observations are not consistent with the narrative at all. I mean, record high stock price with record low yields should translate into there being heavy demand for the dollar, because that would be consistent. But you see, that's not happening. So what's really going on behind the curtain? It's an illusion.
Well, it's hard to know what's going behind the curtain, Rob, because you have the FASB 56 and basically an accounting rule. It's not even a law, but an accounting rule that states that the government can do whatever they want with the money.
Yeah, Rob, but listen, we're told the velocity of money is close to zero, all-time lows, and yet there's over $40 trillion in turnover in Social Security trust accounts.
Exactly.
Well, you know, what's the GDP of America? 22 trillion-ish? But we have a 44 trillion or 40 plus trillion turnover in the Social Security trust accounts, which is a really narrow sliver of economic activity. That doesn't translate. You see, that's not supportive of the notion that velocity of money is at zero. That's actually more supportive that the velocity of money is dramatically higher than what's being advertised, or there's way more money in existence than anyone recognizes.
That's the point I was going to make. Is I think it could be both, but I think there's way more money, and I think FASB 56 lets them hide it. That's the mechanism.
Of course.
Yeah.
Of course. They just don't have to publish what they're really doing. And they can literally just say, go away. It's amazing when you start using the shield of national security, the multitude of transgressions that such a stroke of the pen can really cause. It's unbelievable. But anyway, that to me is what's occurring.
So Rob, they have this money spigot, right? And now they have the accounting law or rule that allows them to do whatever they want with it and hide it. Is that why there's such a fight for this election? Are they trying to retain power of the government?
In my view, yes, that's a very big part of it. And that is why in my view anyway, Rob, that's why the deep state is dug in so hard and is so determined to remove Trump from power. You see, I don't think Trump is wed to central banking. I think Trump has had a very fractious relationship with the Federal Reserve the whole time he's been there. And my true belief is that he's probably been lied to wholesale about the true state of our economy and our monetary system, because he is surrounded by traitors. And he has been surrounded by traitors for his entire first 4 years. And these people are never going to give him straight goods on anything if giving the straight goods is detrimental to the globalist cause. And the preservation of the fiat dollar is absolutely number uno, in my books anyway, goal of the globalist entity. Because until they are ready to collapse the dollar on their timetable and having a very compliant chief executive in America to act in accordance with their views when they collapse the dollar, it's just not going to fly. So they got to get rid of Trump, and they got to put in a puppet like Joe Biden, because when they take the financial system down, they don't want anybody giving them a hard time or disagreeing with them or not doing as instructed. And with Trump, I think they have a wild card, and they can't control him because they don't have dirt on him after they looked for years and tried to stick anything they could to him, whether it's the Russian hoax, I mean, in any manner, shape, or form. They've thrown more crap at Trump, hoping something would stick, and nothing has. And they're frustrated, and they know Trump thinks for himself. And they know he's not a shoo-in or a guarantee to do as instructed, because he has a mind and thinks for himself. And that's why he has to be removed.
So one thing this year, Rob, in 2020 that may have stopped the dollar from really melting up, because we talked about all that missing money, Dr. Mark Skidmore and Catherine Austin Fitts, and that being even bigger than they first reported a few years ago. What really may have slowed down the dollar's demise were the shutdowns this year, because you had a fair amount of deflation, not only in the US, but around the world. And did that take some of the heat off of the dollar, at least visibly, in 2020, do you think?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely it has. I mean, if I knew I was going to have to print record numbers of trillions, and if I was thinking about, okay, I'm going to print all this money, and what kind of a deleterious effect would that have, to my program, I might be very concerned that I'd be in danger of setting off a hyperinflationary event with the creation of so much money. But if I shutter half of the economy along the way, under the auspices of a pandemic, or I'm going to call it a plandemic, if I plan to have a pandemic, then my money printing or the effects or the negative effects of my money printing are blunted dramatically, because so many people don't have money in their hands because they've lost their income and can't pay rent, which has negative spillbacks into real estate. Anyway, it masks a plethora of ugliness in terms of money printing, for sure. And it doesn't prevent, in my view anyway, Rob, it doesn't prevent where we're headed, ultimately where we get to, but it buys time. It's always about buying time. And where I really learned about how important it was to buy time was when I read Robert Rubin's book, his documentary, or his published book on his years in office. And when he was referencing in his book, when he was referencing the Mexican financial crisis back in the 90s, he made in his book, he makes the statement, sometimes we make really, really bad decisions at Treasury, but sometimes these bad decisions are more than justified if they can delay a collapse by 6 or 8 months. Sorry about that. Anyhow, the point is, these people live by a mantra of let's live to play another day. And that's exactly, in my view, what they've been doing. It's another metaphor for the same thing is kicking the can down the road. And as everybody knows, you can continue kicking the can down the road until you run out of road. And my question is, has our financial system finally reached the end of the road?
It could be. And I think one thing that they're trying to hold on for is I don't think they're ready with the government crypto, what I'm talking about, national cryptocurrencies, not the Bitcoins of the world, but their national Fed coins. I don't think that those systems are quite ready to be rolled out yet. So I think that may be one of the reasons they're delaying.
Yeah, I'm simpatico with you on that. But my point is probably speaks more to the notion that any national cryptocurrency, anything that the Fed would be behind, by definition, it would be centralized. And I don't believe we are ever going to have widespread adoption of a centralized cryptocurrency. What gives cryptocurrency appeal is the notion that it's decentralized. That's why Bitcoin has been a success and XRP has been a failure. Ripple is a failure because it's centralized, it's controlled by banks.
Yeah, 14 commercial banks, and they want to use it to replace wire transfers based on
their
own documentation. Yeah,
that is not a replacement for SWIFT that will be readily adopted by the rest of the world, in my opinion, precisely because it's centralized. And what gives cryptocurrencies muster is decentralization. So until that bridge can be built, or until there's a way that central banking authorities can grapple with the notion that a digital currency needs to be decentralized, and yet, I mean, you see, we're talking about oxymorons here. We're talking about central banks who run everything out of a central location somehow has to migrate to a model where there's decentralization, which it's just those are incongruent statements. How does a central bank have a decentralized currency?
They can't.
When you figure that out, please share it with me, because I don't understand how that can happen.
Yeah.
And therefore I don't see how or why anybody would ever agree to adopt on a widespread basis a cryptocurrency controlled by central banks.
Yeah.
To me, it's a non-starter.
I agree with you. And I think for those reasons, it's why people are going into Bitcoin, and also why they're going into gold and silver physically, even though the futures markets don't represent that. People are buying gold and silver. So hand over fist. And there are reports that with the new lockdown in Germany, for example, my friend Dave Kranzler reported from a German website that Germans are buying gold hand over fist at their local shops.
Yeah, and I concur. I mean, I deal with people. I deal with people on the physical metal side, and I can tell you, physical silver is extremely hard to find in size anywhere, and particularly as it pertains to minted product, whether it's maples or silver eagles. Gold went through a period earlier in the year where it was also extremely difficult to source. But the gold market has loosened up a little bit. Physical gold is relatively more available today than it was 4 months ago.
Okay.
Silver, not so much. Silver remains extremely tight and difficult to procure in size. Physical silver. Of course, you can always buy futures, and there will never, ever be a shortage of silver and gold futures. You can buy all you want. The only problem is if you go to have it ever converted into physical, you're probably going to be looking at a default or settlement in fiat.
Yeah.
And in which case, the insurance you thought you had isn't.
Right.
So.
But the COMEX, see, Rob, the COMEX would argue with you. They say they have plenty of physical inventory. So what are your thoughts on that? I mean, they're showing lots of inventory.
Well, that's fine. They can tell us they have plenty of physical and inventory, but when you try to let the games begin, when you try to take delivery of any of that silver, they may have lots. You should see how much gold I have under my desk, but don't ever ask for me to give you any of it. And you can't really see it. You just have to take my word for it that it's there, and that I own it, and that that I haven't sold it to 8 other people, and it's really 8 other people's gold.
Yeah, that's the one thing on audits on the COMEX. They do audits. They never publish the audit. So the audit, being a former auditor, I know that the auditor could say, really bad things if you don't publish the audit. Just the fact it's audited really means nothing. But the part that they really don't tell you on the audits is how many futures transactions are tied to each ounce of silver or gold they actually have.
Of course.
And that's what they're never going to tell you.
Of course. No, but what they do tell you is we have made for TV events when Secretary of the Treasury, Steve Mnuchin, goes to Fort Knox, goes on a tour allegedly of Fort Knox, and comes out and says, he made a great statement, Rob. He said, gold is good. Thank you. And so is a 2-inch thick porterhouse steak. That's good too.
That's right.
But I don't have one in front of me. And if I'm going to procure one, I need to go to a butcher and purchase one. And if one wants to procure large amounts of physical gold bullion, I don't think I'd be going to Fort Knox to look for it.
Rob, in your eyes, if people are interested in gold and silver, should they be getting theirs now? Do you think that there could be shortages on the horizon, real shortages?
Well, there are shortages. There are shortages now. There are severe shortages in silver, less so in gold, and I think those conditions heighten and become more extreme as we move along. The amount of money that was printed this year is far in excess of what was admitted, in my view, and the amount that needs to be printed next year will eclipse what needed to be printed this year. So we've got a lot more money coming. And the amount of gold and silver that gets produced each year is not going up. in accordance with the amount of money being printed.
Mm-hmm.
So physical metal will become tighter and more difficult to procure as time moves along, plain and simple.
Yeah.
But the cryptocurrencies will also continue going up
Mm-hmm.
because they are viewed as an anti-dollar trade as well.
That's right. So Rob, I have a question for you. A lot of people email me all the time asking about liquidity and how they maintain liquidity if the financial system has issues. We have the banking holidays. What are their options there? Is it physical gold and silver? Is it physical cash? Or do you have any recommendation?
Well, an interesting thing that's related to this question you pose, as many people say to me, well, over the years, if the fiat dollar dies, that means commerce stops.
Mm-hmm.
And nothing could be further from the truth than to make that kind of a statement. Commerce will never stop.
Mm-hmm.
Commerce will continue. It's just what form commerce is conducted in, or what settlement mechanism we use to conduct trading. I mean, at the end of the day, people will always at least barter. And I mean, fiat money is really a barter situation anyway.
Mm.
You exchange your labor for money, or something you perceive to be money, or something that is supposed to be money, or something that they're really printing maybe 3 times more, or 4 or 10 or 20 times more than they admit. But I mean, that's a trade. Your labor for remuneration.
Mm-hmm.
So whether you're remunerated in Bitcoin, or whether you're remunerated in fiat dollars, or whether you're remunerated in bushels of wheat, or whether you're remunerated in horse droppings, I mean, it's all a form of trade, and it's all barter. Mm-hmm. Everything's barter. Commerce is barter. That's what commerce is. It's barter. And barter will never stop. What we settle our barter trades in, that's open for discussion.
Mm-hmm.
But clearly something where nobody knows how much of it is being created is suitable or dependable as a means to settle anything.
Mm-hmm. So thoughts for 2021? I know 2020 has been a really tough year because of the shutdowns, because of the uncertainty around the elections. What are your thoughts for 2021? Do you see the election thing being resolved in the first few weeks? And if so, what are your thoughts for going forward?
Well, my belief is somebody will occupy the White House or the Oval Office by the 20th of January.
Mm-hmm.
My view is if it's Joe Biden, we in the Western world have extreme difficulties coming our way. If it's Trump, we very likely will have a lot of domestic unrest, mm-hmm. and possibly uprisings, because I think that the Democrats and the people on the left have lost their minds, frankly. I see gold and silver in its physical form becoming much more dear in the future. And reason for that is I do believe that the futures markets will at some point, and 2021 might be the year for it, where these fake price discovery mechanisms called LBMA and COMEX might very well be sufficiently discredited in the coming months, where the metals markets move to a cash and carry type of trade, mm-hmm. where the people doing the unlimited selling of metals futures might very well abandon that practice, recognizing that it's a waste of resources to engage in such activity, and they might become strictly physical buyers themselves. I think that's in the cards going forward, at which point we may see price rises in the physical metals that look a lot more like the way cryptocurrencies have moved up in the past year. That's what I think is coming.
So Texas and Nevada have started their own bullion depositories. I think Nevada just voted on theirs. Texas actually has theirs in place. Do you think we could see more local gold and silver markets?
Absolutely, I believe we will. But those markets will be in the form of physical. I mean, nobody's gonna open a depository or open a reserve of gold futures or silver futures. If they're going to invest, let's just say quasi-sovereign resources, and I only say that because I don't recognize Nevada as a sovereign country. They're a state within the union, but I mean, there's a reason why they're procuring physical metal. These are insiders. These are people that know how the system is built. Why are they buying physical metal? Because they have little trust in the financial system. They have little trust in the futures markets, and they clearly have little trust in fiat money, because they know and are aware that more is being printed than what is acknowledged.
And we've had local state currencies before. In fact, we've had currencies that weren't even state currencies; they were local currencies. So, worst case scenario, if we get to that barter type of economy, local area jurisdictions could have their own locally sanctioned currencies to facilitate trade.
Absolutely. We could have local currencies backed locally by a bullion depository, for instance. Yep. That I believe is absolutely conceivable and possibly in the cards in the coming year.
Any other thought, Ross, before we wrap up this conversation about year-end or 2021 for the viewers?
I say everybody should have a Merry Christmas. I say everybody should take a pill and chill. And we need to get through this. We've got some tough roads in front of us in the very near future. And I hope cool heads prevail. And I hope that America sees a way to get back to adherence to the Constitution. I mean, I live in Canada, and in my view, there's nothing better than a patriot as neighbor. And I hope that patriots are successful in restoring the Constitution and restoring the Republic, because I feel that they are on very, very, very thin ice right now. And I would hate to see their demise.
Thank you, Rob, very much. Hope you have a very Merry Christmas, and we'll speak to you again next year.
Same to you.
Okay.
Here at Glint, we're making money fairer. How? By using gold. Glint lets you store, exchange, send, and spend multiple currencies, including gold, through a simple iPhone or Android app. Register for your Glint account today by downloading the app from your favorite app store.